In the vast expanse of the Galactic Federation, where 1,000 species had found their place among the stars, there existed an unspoken truth that every civilized being understood. Humans were weak. They were the janitors, the manual laborers, the expendable workforce that kept the galaxy running while their betters conducted the important business of civilization. Captain Zexhai of the Vorthak Empire had built his reputation on this simple fact. For 15 cycles, he had hunted the most dangerous prey across known space, collecting trophies from apex predators of 100 worlds. His ship's walls displayed the skulls of Rigelian Deathstalkers, the crystallized hearts of Centaurian void wraiths, and the bioluminescent spines of deep space leviathans. Each kill had been a testament to his superiority, his rightful place at the top of the galactic food chain. But today, staring at the human maintenance worker who had just requested passage on his vessel, Zexhai felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Curiosity mixed with contempt. The creature before him was unremarkable in every way. Average height, soft features, no visible weapons or enhancements. Just another member of the galaxy's most pathetic species, desperate for work. What Zexhai didn't know was that Marcus Chun had spent the last 20 years very carefully cultivating that exact impression. And now, trapped together on a ship heading toward the lawless Outer Rim, both predator and prey were about to discover what it truly meant to underestimate a human. The hunt was about to begin, but this time, the roles would be very, very different than anyone expected. Marcus Chun wiped his hands on the greasy coveralls and stepped back from the atmospheric recycler, watching as the green diagnostic lights flickered to life across its surface. The Vorthak crew members who had been supervising him exchanged glances filled with the casual contempt he had grown accustomed to over the years. "Human work acceptable," grunted Supamander Thok, his translated voice carrying the same dismissive tone that most aliens used when addressing his species. "Continue with ventilation systems. No mistakes." Marcus nodded respectfully, keeping his eyes downcast in the submissive posture that had served him well throughout the galaxy. "Yes, sir. I'll have the whole ship running perfectly by tomorrow." The truth was, he had already identified 17 critical flaws in the ship's systems during his first hour aboard. The plasma conduits were overcharged and ready to rupture. The navigation computer had a corrupted memory core that would fail during hyperspace transit, and the life support backup systems had been installed backwards by some incompetent engineer. Any one of these problems could kill the entire crew within hours. But Marcus said nothing. Instead, he shuffled off toward the ventilation access panels, carrying his worn toolbox with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades maintaining starships across the outer colonies. Captain Zexhai watched the human disappear into the maintenance crawlways from his position on the bridge. The creature was smaller than most of its species, with graying hair and the soft, pale skin that marked humans as prey animals in the galactic ecosystem. Perfect camouflage for what he had in mind. "Sir," said his navigation officer, a sleek Corvani female whose blue-scaled skin shimmered under the bridge lights. "We will reach the terminus system in 18 standard hours. The hunting grounds await." Zexhai's mandibles clicked together in what his species consider smile. The terminus system was a lawless region of space where the Federation's influence held no sway. Pirates, smugglers, and worse made their homes among the asteroid fields and dead worlds that orbited the dying red giant at its heart. More importantly, for Zexhai's purposes, it was where the most dangerous game could be found. "Excellent, Veltor, and our passenger." The human continues its work in the lower decks. It appears to be efficient at its tasks. Zexhai Widung. Humans were always efficient workers. It was what made them such perfect prey. They were predictable, submissive, and utterly without the killer instincts that separated true predators from the countless herbivore species that filled the galaxy's civilized worlds. In the depths of the ship, Marcus carefully removed an access panel and slipped into the narrow maintenance shaft that ran between the outer hull and the crew quarters. His movements were precise and silent, the result of countless hours spent learning to move unseen through the bowels of alien spacecraft. He had been tracking Captain Zexai for 3 months now, following the Vortex trail from one hunting expedition to the next. The pattern was always the same. Zexai would take on human passengers or crew members under various pretenses, then hunt them for sport once the ship reached lawless space. 7 humans had disappeared during his documented hunts, though Marcus suspected the real number was much higher. The Federation authorities couldn't touch Zexai. Technically, he hadn't committed any crimes in civilized space, and the testimony of a few traumatized survivors wasn't enough to overcome his political connections within the Vortex Empire. But Marcus wasn't Federation authority. He was something much older and far more dangerous. Moving through the ship's infrastructure like a ghost, Marcus began the delicate process of rewiring critical systems. Not to sabotage them, that would be too obvious, but to give him self-control when the time came. A tap into the communication array here, a bypass circuit in the weapon systems there, all carefully hidden behind legitimate maintenance work. Hours passed as he worked, his enhanced reflexes and decades of experience allowing him to move through areas that would be impossible for an ordinary human to navigate. When crew members passed by, he froze in place, using breathing techniques learned in places that no longer existed to slow his heart rate to near-death levels. By the time the ship's night cycle began, Marcus had gained access to nearly every critical system aboard the vessel. He knew the location of every weapon, every security camera, every potential escape route. More importantly, he had confirmed what he suspected from the moment he set foot on the ship. Captain Zexai wasn't just a hunter. He was a collector. The captain's private quarters contained a display case filled with trophies from his kills, but not the alien predators he bragged about to his crew. Human skulls, jewelry, personal effects, the remains of his real prey, carefully preserved and cataloged like specimens in a museum. Marcus felt the familiar cold anger settle into his chest as he studied the collection through a maintenance camera he had quietly hacked. Among the skulls, he recognized the face of Sarah Kim, a terraforming engineer who had disappeared 6 months ago while traveling to a new colony world. She had been someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. Now, she was just another trophy in a psychopath collection. He closed his eyes and let himself remember for just a moment. 25 years ago, during humanity's first tentative steps into galactic society, his own sister had accepted a job aboard an alien freighter. She was going to make enough money to support their family back on Earth, maybe even by passage off-world for their parents. She never arrived at her destination. The ship was found drifting in space 3 weeks later, its human crew mysteriously missing. The alien crew claimed they had been dropped off at a way station, but no record of the transaction existed. The case was closed due to lack of evidence. Marcus had spent the next 5 years learning everything he could about galactic law, alien psychology, and the 1,000 small cruelties that a species endured as the galaxy's bottom feeders. Then, he had disappeared from civilized space entirely, spending another 15 years in places where survival required skills that most humans never needed to develop. Now he was back, and he had work to do. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, the sensation barely noticeable through the deck plating. Marcus checked his chronometer and nodded. Right on schedule. They had arrived at the terminus system, where Captain Zexai would soon begin his hunt. But this time the prey had sharp teeth. Marcus finished installing the last of his modifications to the ship's systems and made his way back to the maintenance bay where his official quarters were located. He needed to be visible and accounted for when the captain made his move. Everything depended on playing his role perfectly. He found Subcommander Thok waiting for him in the corridor, the Vortex reptilian features arranged in what might have been amusement. "Human," Thok said. "Captain requires your presence." "Now." Marcus ducked his head submissively. "Of course, sir. Is there a problem with my work?" "No problem. Captain wishes to discuss your future employment." The word sent a chill down Marcus's spine, but he maintained his facade of nervous compliance. This was it. The moment he had been preparing for since he first learned of Zexai's existence. "I'll be right there," he said, gathering up his tools with slightly trembling hands. The tremor was genuine, not from fear, but from anticipation. After 20 years of hunting criminals in the galaxy's darkest corners, he was finally going to face the creature responsible for his sister's death. As he followed Thok through the ship's corridors toward the captain's quarters, Marcus caught glimpses of the crew preparing for something. Weapons were being checked and cleaned, hunting gear was being distributed, and there was an air of excited anticipation that reminded him of pack hunters preparing for a kill. They had no idea what they were about to face. Captain Zexai's quarters were larger than Marcus had expected, decorated with the trophies and hunting memorabilia of a career spent killing for pleasure. The captain himself stood with his back to the door, studying a star chart that showed the Terminus system's many hiding places. "Ah, our maintenance worker," Zexai said without turning around. "I trust your work has been satisfactory." "Yes, sir. All systems are operating within normal parameters." "Excellent." The captain finally turned his predatory eyes, studying Marcus like a piece of meat. "I have a proposition for you, human. A chance to earn significantly more than your standard maintenance fee." Marcus shifted nervously from foot to foot. "What kind of work, sir?" Zexai's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Nothing too strenuous. You see, I have arranged a small hunting expedition on one of the system's uninhabited worlds. I need someone to serve as bait." "Bait, sir?" Marcus let his voice crack slightly with fear. "Oh, don't worry. The local predators are quite quick. You probably won't suffer for more than a few minutes." The casual cruelty of the statement would have shocked most humans, but Marcus had heard worse from creatures who thought his species was too primitive to understand their true intentions. He let his face go pale and took a step backward. "Sir, I don't understand. I'm just a maintenance worker. I haven't done anything wrong." "No, you haven't," Zexai agreed. "This isn't punishment, human. It's simply nature taking its course. Predators hunt prey. It's the way of the universe." Marcus continued backing away until his shoulders hit the wall. "Please, Captain, there must be some mistake. I have family waiting for me, a wife and children who need the money I'm earning." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that prey animals told when cornered. Zexai seemed to enjoy it immensely. "I'm sure they'll understand," the captain said. "After all, you'll be contributing to science. I plan to document your death quite thoroughly. Future generations of hunters will benefit from studying the footage." The casual mention of recording his death triggered something deep in Marcus's mind. Suddenly, he wasn't standing in an alien captain's quarters anymore. He was back in the ruins of Kepler Station, watching through a surveillance camera as creatures that had once been human stalked through the corridors, their bodies twisted by experiments that should never have been conducted. He was back on the prison moon of Tartarus, where alien crime lords forced human captives to fight to the death for their amusement. He was back in the slave markets of the Outer Rim, where his people were bought and sold like livestock. He was back in all the dark places where humanity's weakness had made them victims, and where he had learned that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become something that the predators feared more than death itself. Marcus raised his head and looked directly into Captain Zexai's eyes for the first time since boarding the ship. The change in his demeanor was so subtle that the alien didn't notice it at first. But something in the human's gaze made Zexai's hunting instincts stir uneasily. "When do we start?" Marcus asked quietly. The question caught the captain off guard. He had expected begging, pleading, perhaps an attempt to bargain or escape. He hadn't expected calm acceptance. "Tomorrow," Zexai said after a moment. "We'll land on Zirian Prime at dawn. It's a perfect hunting ground, lots of cover, dangerous native wildlife, and no Federation presence to interfere with our sport." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand. Will I be given any equipment? Weapons? Survival gear? Weapons?" "Zexai Lauget." "You're the prey, human. Prey doesn't get weapons." "Of course not. Silly of me to ask." But as Marcus turned to leave, Zexai caught a glimpse of something in the human's expression that made his blood run cold. For just an instant, The submissive maintenance worker was gone, replaced by something that looked back at him with the cold, calculating gaze of a killer. Then, the moment passed, and Marcus was shuffling toward the door with the same defeated posture he had worn since coming aboard. "Sweet dreams, human," HFY called after him. "Enjoy your last night in civilized space." Marcus paused at the doorway without turning around. "Thank you for the warning, Captain. I'll make sure to get plenty of rest." There was something in the way he said it that made HFY's skin crawl, but the captain dismissed the feeling as pre-hunt excitement. Tomorrow he would add another human skull to his collection, and the galaxy would be reminded once again that some species were born to rule while others existed only to serve. As Marcus made his way back to his quarters, he passed through the ship's common areas where the crew was celebrating their upcoming hunt. They spoke in their native languages, but he understood enough to catch fragments of their conversation. They were planning to give him a head start before beginning the chase. 30 minutes to find cover and prepare for the inevitable. They discussed the various ways they might kill him, the weapons they would use, the techniques that would cause the most entertaining death throes for their recordings. Marcus listened to it all with the patient calm of a professional evaluating his targets. By the time he reached his quarters, he had memorized the voice patterns, hunting preferences, and psychological profiles of every crew member who would be participating in tomorrow's hunt. There were 12 of them in total, not counting Captain HFY himself. All experienced killers, all armed with military-grade weapons, all confident in their superiority over a single human maintenance worker. It was going to be a memorable day for everyone involved. Marcus sealed his quarters and began the process of preparing for the hunt. Not the kind of preparation that HFY expected from his prey, but the methodical routine of a predator getting ready to do what he did best. From his toolkit, he withdrew items that looked like ordinary maintenance equipment, but served entirely different purposes. A plasma torch that could cut through hull plating became a devastating close-range weapon. Magnetic clamps designed for zero-gravity work could easily crush alien bones. A diagnostic scanner could be quickly modified into a motion detector that would give him advance warning of approaching threats. But his most important tools weren't technological. They were the skills he had learned during 15 years of hunting monsters in the galaxy's darkest corners, where the Federation's laws meant nothing and survival belonged to those willing to do whatever was necessary. As he worked, Marcus allowed himself to think about his sister one last time. Jenny had been an optimist, someone who believed that humanity could find its place among the stars through honest work and peaceful cooperation. She had died because she trusted aliens who saw her as nothing more than entertainment. Tomorrow, on the surface of Zirian Prime, Marcus would make sure that Captain HFY learned what it meant to be hunted by something far more dangerous than any native predator. The crew of this ship had spent years treating humans as disposable prey. It was time to show them what apex predators actually looked like. The surface of Zirian Prime was a nightmare landscape of twisted rock formations and perpetual twilight. The dying red giant that served as the system's star cast everything in shades of crimson and shadow, creating a maze of hiding places among the jagged stone pillars that rose from the planet's surface like the bones of some ancient titan. Marcus stood at the edge of the landing platform, hands bound behind his back with energy shackles, while Captain HFY's hunting party made their final preparations. The aliens moved with the confident swagger of apex predators, checking their weapons and discussing strategy in voices loud enough for their prey to hear. "Remember," HFY addressed his crew, "we give the human 30 minutes before we begin tracking. I want this hunt to last at least 6 hours. Kill shots only when I give a signal." Sub-Commander Thok hefted a plasma rifle that could punch through starship armor. What if it finds shelter? These rock formations could hide a dozen humans. "Then we flush it out," laughed Veltar, the Corvani navigator. "I brought sonic charges. They'll collapse any hiding spot the prey might find." Marcus listened to their planning with the detached interest of a professional studying his opponents. 12 hunters, all armed with military-grade equipment. Plasma rifles, sonic weapons, motion trackers, and aerial surveillance drones. On paper, it should be a massacre, but paper had never accounted for the human capacity for adaptation. Captain Zexhai approached Marcus with a ceremonial knife, its blade etched with the hunting marks of previous kills. Any last words? Maintenance worker? Perhaps a message for your fictional family? Marcus looked up at the towering alien with eyes that held no trace of fear. Just one question, Captain. Oh, what's that? In all your hunting expeditions, have you ever wondered why humans spread so quickly across the galaxy despite being such weak prey animals? Zexhai paused, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Random chance. Your species breeds quickly and spreads like a virus. Natural selection hasn't had time to weed out your weaknesses. Interesting theory, Marcus said quietly. I guess we'll find out soon enough. The captain used his knife to cut through Marcus's restraints, then stepped back to a safe distance. Your 30-minute start now, human. I suggest you use them wisely. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the shackles had been, then looked around at the alien landscape with the careful attention of someone surveying a battlefield. The red light filtering through the thin atmosphere revealed dozens of potential routes through the rock formations, each offering different advantages and disadvantages. Without another word, he turned and sprinted toward the nearest cluster of stone pillars, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to surprise the watching aliens. Within seconds, he had disappeared into the maze of shadows and twisted rock. Fast for prey, Thok observed. But speed won't save it. Zexhai checked his chronometer. Indeed, 29 minutes and 30 seconds until we begin the real hunt. Prepare your equipment. Deep within the rock maze, Marcus was already beginning his own preparations. The moment he was out of sight from the landing platform, his entire demeanor had changed. The shuffling maintenance worker was gone, replaced by something that moved through the alien landscape like a ghost. His first priority was intelligence gathering. Using techniques learned during urban warfare on a dozen different worlds, he scaled one of the taller rock formations to get a better view of the terrain. The stone was sharp and treacherous, but his enhanced reflexes and years of zero-gravity training allowed him to climb surfaces that would challenge most aliens. From his vantage point, he could see the entire hunting ground laid out below him. The rock formations formed a rough circle about 10 kilometers in diameter, surrounded by open ground that would be nearly impossible to cross without being detected. Several deep chasms cut through the area, creating natural barriers that would channel movement along predictable paths. It was actually a brilliant hunting ground for traditional predators. Unfortunately for Zexhai's crew, they weren't dealing with traditional prey. Marcus memorized the terrain layout, identifying choke points, ambush sites, and potential supply caches. Then, he began the delicate process of setting up his hunting grounds. From his modified toolkit, he withdrew a collection of devices that would have shocked any alien who saw them. Motion sensors that could detect approaching footsteps from half a kilometer away. Micro-explosives designed to look like ordinary rocks, but capable of bringing down a stone pillar. Monofilament wire that could slice through most body armor like paper. But his most devastating weapon was something no scanner could detect: his knowledge of alien psychology and hunting patterns. Humans had survived on 100 worlds precisely because they were underestimated. While other species relied on natural advantages like claws, fangs, or armor plating, humans had developed something far more dangerous: the ability to study their predators and turn their own strengths against them. Marcus had spent 3 months learning everything about Captain Zexhai's hunting style. The Vorthak preferred to lead from the front, using his superior size and strength to drive prey toward his waiting crew members. Thok was a heavy weapons specialist who relied on overwhelming firepower rather than finesse. Veltar used speed and agility, darting in for quick strikes before retreating to safety. Each of them had patterns, preferences, and weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who understood the art of hunting hunters. 20 minutes into his preparation time, Marcus heard the distant whine of aerial surveillance drones beginning their patrol patterns. The hunt was starting early, but he had expected that. Aliens who enjoyed torturing prey rarely had the patience to follow their own rules. He smiled grimly and activated the first phase of his plan. The micro-explosives he had planted began generating false heat signatures throughout the rock maze. To the aliens' thermal sensors, it would appear that their prey was moving erratically through the formations, sometimes in multiple locations simultaneously. At the same time, his motion detectors began feeding him real-time data about the hunters' positions. They were spreading out in a classic encirclement pattern, moving to cut off all escape routes before closing in for the kill. Marcus counted 12 distinct signatures, plus Captain Zexai himself, who was hanging back to coordinate the hunt. Perfect. They were all committed to the engagement. The first hunter to enter his kill zone was a young Korvani warrior named Esikitar, moving through a narrow passage between two rock pillars with his plasma rifle held at the ready. He was following one of the false heat signatures, completely unaware that his true prey was positioned directly above him. Marcus waited until the alien was perfectly positioned, then dropped a micro-explosive directly onto his helmet. The small device adhered to the alien's cranial ridge and detonated 3 seconds later, sending Esikitar crashing to the ground with his nervous system scrambled by the electromagnetic pulse. The hunter wasn't dead, but he would be unconscious for hours. Marcus quickly stripped him of his weapons and communication gear before dragging the body into a concealed crevice. 1 down, 12 to go. Over the hunter's communication network, which Marcus was now monitoring through Esikitar's gear, he heard Captain Zexai's voice crackling with confusion. Esikitar, report. What was that explosion? Static answered him. After several more attempts to reach the missing hunter, Zexai's tone shifted from confusion to anger. All units maintain formation, but increase caution. The prey may have found some kind of improvised explosive. Marcus smiled as he heard the uncertainty creeping into the captain's voice. Nothing disturbed a predator's confidence like discovering that their prey might actually be dangerous. The second kill came 20 minutes later. A Vorthak warrior named Gekmor was investigating the area where Esikitar had disappeared when Marcus struck from below, emerging from a hidden cave system and wrapping monofilament wire around the alien's throat before dragging him underground. This time, there was no explosion to mask the attack. One moment Gekmor was reporting his position over the comm system, and the next moment there was only silence. Gekmor? Zexai's voice was sharp with alarm. Respond immediately. When no response came, Marcus heard the captain begin issuing new orders to his remaining hunters. All units fall back to defensive positions. Something is wrong here. Sir, came Thok's confused voice. It's just one human. How much trouble can it cause? 2 of my hunters have vanished without a trace, Zexai snarled. That's not normal prey behavior. Marcus used the confusion to reposition himself for the next phase of his attack. The hunters were beginning to group together for mutual support, which was exactly what he had hoped they would do. Using Esikitar's stolen communication gear, he began broadcasting false position reports and emergency signals on the hunter's frequency. Within minutes, the team was scattered across the hunting ground again, chasing ghosts and false alarms while their real prey stalked them through the shadows. The third kill was almost artistic in its precision. A Rigelian hunter named Hexfor was investigating a false distress signal when Marcus triggered a carefully placed explosive charge that brought down a massive stone pillar. The alien had exactly 2 seconds to realize what was happening before several tons of rock buried him alive. By now, the remaining hunters were beginning to panic. What should have been a leisurely hunt was turning into a nightmare where their prey seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. This is impossible. Thok's voice crackled over the comm system. No human has these capabilities. Marcus decided it was time to introduce himself properly. Switching to the hunter's main frequency, he spoke in a calm, conversational tone. Hello, Captain Zexai. I thought it was time we had a proper conversation. The silence that followed was deafening. When Zexai finally responded, his voice was tight with rage and growing fear. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I'm exactly what you thought I was," Marcus replied. "A human maintenance worker. My name is Marcus Chun, and I've been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time." "Impossible. You're just prey." Marcus's laugh was cold as space itself. "That's what your last 7 victims thought too. Right up until the moment you started hunting them for sport." There was another long silence before Zexai spoke again. "You know about the others?" "Oh, I know about all of them. Sarah Kim, the terraforming engineer. David Okafor, the cargo specialist. Li Wei, the communications technician." Should I continue? Marcus could hear weapons being charged and safety systems being disengaged as the remaining hunters prepared for a fight. They were finally beginning to understand they might lose. "What do you want?" "Zethai demandet." "Justice," Marcus said simply. "Your species has been hunting mine for decades, treating us like animals for your amusement. Today, that ends. You're 1 human against 9 trained warriors. Even if you have some tricks, you can't possibly win." "You're probably right," Marcus agreed. "But here's the thing about humans, Captain. We don't always fight to win. Sometimes we fight to make sure the other side loses." The implication of those words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus could hear nervous chittering and clicking as the surviving hunters began to realize that they might not be dealing with prey at all. They were facing something that had been systematically picking them off one by one, using their own hunting ground against them with a skill that suggested military training and battlefield experience far beyond anything a maintenance worker should possess. "Fall back to the ship," Zexai ordered his crew. "Immediate evacuation." "Too late for that," Marcus informed him conversationally. "I'm afraid your ship has developed some serious mechanical problems. Funny thing about maintenance workers, we know exactly which systems to target for maximum effect." To emphasize his point, Marcus triggered a small explosive charge he had planted near the ship's landing platform. The resulting fireball lit up the twilight sky like a second sun, and when the flames died down, the hunting party's means of escape was nothing but twisted metal and burning debris. "You destroyed our ship," Thok said in disbelief. "You've killed us all." "Not necessarily," Marcus replied. "I'm prepared to offer the same terms you gave your other victims. I'll give you a 30-minute head start before I come looking for you." The channel erupted with alien curses and threats, but beneath the bravado, Marcus could hear the unmistakable sound of fear. The hunters were finally beginning to understand what it felt like to be prey, and the hunt was just getting started. The 30 minutes Marcus had promised passed in tense silence across the hunting grounds of Zirian Prime. Through his stolen surveillance equipment, he watched the remaining hunters frantically attempt to establish a defensive perimeter around the wreckage of their ship. They moved with the desperate energy of predators who had suddenly found themselves at the bottom of the food chain. Captain Zexai was shouting orders, trying to maintain some semblance of command and control as his carefully planned hunt disintegrated into chaos. But Marcus could see the cracks forming in the aliens' coordination. Fear was a poison that spread quickly through a group, and nothing destroyed unit cohesion faster than the realization that their enemy was systematically dismantling them. Subcommander Thok had positioned himself behind a twisted piece of hull plating, his heavy plasma cannon trained on the approach routes to their makeshift fortress. 2 Korvani warriors flanked him, their sleek forms barely visible in the red twilight as they scanned the rock formations for any sign of movement. The remaining 6 hunters had spread out in a loose circle around the crash site, each one watching a different sector of the surrounding terrain. It was actually a competent defensive position, the kind of formation that might have worked against a conventional assault. Unfortunately for them, Marcus wasn't planning a conventional assault. "Time's up," his voice crackled over their communication system, causing several of the aliens to flinch involuntarily. What followed wasn't an attack in any sense that the hunters would have recognized. Instead, Marcus began a systematic campaign of psychological warfare designed to break their morale before he ever showed himself. The first incident happened to Korvash, a young Rigelian warrior positioned on the perimeter's eastern edge. He had been scanning the shadows between two massive stone pillars when something moved in his peripheral vision. He spun toward the motion, finger tightening on his weapon's trigger, only to find empty air. But when he turned back to his assigned sector, there was something new etched into the rock face directly in front of him. Scratched into the stone with precision that suggested mechanical tools were words in perfectly rendered galactic standard. Your sister screams beautifully when she dies. The message was a lie. Marcus had no way of knowing anything about Corvash's family, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the implications it carried. Somehow, their human prey had gotten close enough to carve words in a solid rock without being detected. He could have just as easily carved them into Corvash's skull. "Captain," the young alien whispered into his comm unit. "There's a message here, carved into the rock." He was here. Zexai's response was immediate and sharp. "All units, report status. Has anyone else seen signs of the human?" The responses came back negative, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty in their voices. He was inside their defensive perimeter, moving through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate unseen, and none of their sensors were detecting him. The second incident occurred 15 minutes later. Veltar, the Corvani navigator who had been so eager to hunt humans for sport, was monitoring her assigned sector when her motion sensors began registering false readings. Objects that appeared to be moving through the rocks toward her position, then vanished before she could get a visual confirmation. She reported the anomalous readings to Captain Zexai, who ordered 2 other hunters to investigate. When they reached her position, they found her motion sensor array had been carefully disassembled and rebuilt into a sculpture that vaguely resembled a screaming face. "He's playing with us," Thok growled over the comm channel, "trying to make us panic." "Is it working?" Marcus's voice cut into their frequency, causing the big alien to jump. "Show yourself, coward," Thok roared. "Fight like a warrior." Marcus's laughter was cold and utterly without humor. "You want me to fight like a warrior? That's interesting, coming from someone who hunts unarmed civilians for entertainment." The truth of those words hit the hunters like a physical blow. For decades, they had told themselves that their victims deserved death simply by virtue of being weak. Now they were discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that philosophy. "We are soldiers," Zexai protested, "warriors of the Vorthak Empire. We have earned the right to hunt lesser species." "Really?" Marcus's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. "Tell me, Captain, what was your greatest military victory? Which enemy army did you defeat to earn that right?" The silence that followed was telling. Zexai had spent his entire career hunting defenseless civilians and calling it sport. He had never faced an enemy that could fight back, never tested his skills against anything more dangerous than terrified refugees. Marcus continued his monologue, his voice conversational despite the circumstances. "I've read your military record, Zexai. 3 combat decorations, all awarded for pacification operations against unarmed colony worlds. 200 confirmed kills, every single one of them a civilian who never even owned a weapon." "Shut up," the captain snarled. "Your crew has an even more impressive record." Thok received his combat rating for massacring a medical facility on Kepler-7. Veltar earned her stripes by bombing refugee camps. Such brave warriors, hunting the most dangerous prey in the galaxy. Each word was carefully chosen to remind the hunters that they weren't soldiers facing an enemy combatant. They were bullies who had finally encountered someone willing to fight back. The psychological pressure was beginning to tell. Marcus could see it in the way the hunters moved, the constant nervous glances over their shoulders, the gradually loosening formation as discipline gave way to fear. It was time to escalate. The attack, when it came, was so swift and silent that it was over before the aliens realized it had begun. Corvash, already rattled by the message carved into the stone, was rotating his position to check his flanks when something struck him from above with the force of a falling meteorite. Marcus had dropped from a concealed position in the rock formations, using a modified grav harness to control his descent. The impact drove Corvash to the ground with enough force to shatter several of his exoskeletal plates, and before the alien could recover, Marcus had stripped him of his weapons and vanished back into the shadows. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. By the time the other hunters responded to Corvash's screams, their attacker was gone, leaving behind only an unconscious alien and the growing realization that their defensive perimeter was meaningless against an enemy who could strike from any direction. Medical assistance. Corvash groaned into his comm unit. Internal injuries, possible spinal damage. But there was no medical facility, no way to treat serious injuries in their current situation. The hunters had come prepared to inflict death, not to preserve life. He's picking us off one by one. Veltar stated the obvious with growing panic in her voice. We need to call for reinforcement. From who? Thok demanded. We're in the Terminus system. No Federation presence, no military backup. Even if we could get a message out, help wouldn't arrive for days. Captain HFY tried to reassert control over the deteriorating situation. We stick to the plan. Defensive formation, overlapping fields of fire. He's just one human. We can outlast him. But Marcus had no intention of giving them time to regroup. His next attack came from an entirely different direction, targeting the psychological weak point he had identified in their formation. Using the ship's destroyed communication array, he began broadcasting a signal on a very specific frequency. Not words this time, but sounds. The death screams of his sister, recorded during her final moments aboard the alien freighter 25 years ago. He had carried that recording with him for decades, a reminder of what happened when humans trusted aliens who saw them as prey. Now it served a different purpose entirely. The screams echoed across the hunting ground like the voice of a vengeful ghost, rising and falling with the kind of agony that only came from true terror. Every alien on the planet could hear it, and every one of them was forced to confront the reality of what they had been doing to human victims for years. Turn it off. Veltar shriket. Make it stop. But Marcus had hardwired the broadcast system. The only way to silence it would be to destroy the transmitter, which meant leaving their defensive perimeter and venturing into his hunting ground. It's psychological warfare, HFY said, though his voice lacked conviction. He's trying to break our morale. It's working, Thok admitted. The big warrior was visibly shaken by the sounds of human agony echoing through the night. For the first time, he was being forced to confront the reality that his victims had been sentient beings capable of experiencing the same fear he was feeling now. Marcus let the recording play for exactly 17 minutes, the same amount of time his sister had suffered before finally dying. When silence returned to the hunting ground, it seemed almost more ominous than the screams had been. That was Jennifer Chun. Marcus's voice broke the silence. My sister. She was 23 years old when your people hunted her for sport. She wanted to be a teacher. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Several of the hunters tried to respond, but their voices caught in their throats. She believed in peaceful coexistence, Marcus continued. Thought that humans could find their place in galactic society through honest work and mutual cooperation. She died screaming your names, begging for mercy that never came. Captain HFY finally found his voice. We didn't kill your sister. This is a mistake. No mistake, Marcus replied. I tracked down the crew that murdered her. Some of them died quickly. Others didn't. But none of them told me who gave the orders. None of them explained why human lives are considered worthless by creatures like you. The hunters were beginning to understand that this wasn't random violence. Their human prey had a specific grievance, a personal reason for hunting them, that made him infinitely more dangerous than any wild animal or territorial predator. What do you want? Thok asked. Revenge? We can negotiate. Payment for your loss. Marcus's laughter was like broken glass. Payment? You think Jennifer's life has a price that can be paid in credits? Then what? Veltar demanded. What will satisfy you? Understanding, Marcus said simply. I want you to understand what it feels like to be hunted by something you can't fight, can't escape, and can't negotiate with. I want you to experience the same helplessness my sister felt during her final moments. The implication was clear. This wouldn't end with a quick death or negotiated surrender. Marcus intended to hunt them the same way they had hunted his people, slowly, methodically, with plenty of time to savor their fear. "You're insane," Zexai stated. "Probably," Marcus agreed. 25 years of hunting monsters in the dark corners of the galaxy tends to have that effect. But here's the thing about insanity, Captain. It makes you very good at thinking like your enemies. To prove his point, Marcus triggered the next phase of his assault. Hidden throughout the crash site, he had placed small incendiary devices that now ignited simultaneously. The hunters' improvised fortress was suddenly illuminated by dozens of small fires, destroying their night vision and creating dancing shadows that could hide a dozen attackers. In the chaos that followed, Marcus struck again. This time his target was Veltar, the Corvani navigator whose speed and agility had made her overconfident in her ability to escape danger. He came at her from directly overhead, dropping through a pillar of flame like an avenging demon. His modified plasma torch carved through her body armor like paper, and she collapsed with third-degree burns across her torso before she could even scream. By the time the other hunters reached her position, Marcus was gone again, vanished into the maze of fire and shadow he had created. Veltar was alive, but badly injured, another burden for the remaining hunters to carry. 7 down. Marcus announced over their comm system. 6 to go. The remaining hunters huddled together in the center of their burning perimeter, weapons trained in all directions, waiting for an attack that could come from anywhere at any time. They were no longer predators. They were prey animals, trapped in a cage with something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined possible. And the night was still young. Dawn was still hours away on Zirian Prime, but the red giant star cast enough light to reveal the carnage that had unfolded across the hunting ground. Where 12 confident predators had begun their sport, only 6 terrified aliens remained, huddled around the burning wreckage of their ship like primitives around a campfire. Captain Zexai had abandoned all pretense of military discipline. His hunting party was reduced to a survival group, and their chances of seeing another sunrise grew dimmer with each passing hour. The human they had dismissed as helpless prey had systematically dismantled their formation, their morale, and their fundamental understanding of their place in the galactic hierarchy. "Status report," Zexai demanded, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders into the darkness. Thok checked his remaining ammunition for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Plasma charges at 60%. No contact with the target for 2 hours. Medical status on the wounded? The news wasn't good. Veltar was stable, but would need proper medical attention within hours or risk permanent damage from her burns. Corvash had regained consciousness, but couldn't move without assistance due to his spinal injuries. Of the 6 remaining hunters, only 4 were combat effective. "Sir," came the voice of Dexmore, one of the younger Vorthak warriors, "permission to speak freely?" "Zethai notet vili. We should surrender. Offer terms. This human clearly has military training beyond anything we anticipated. Continuing to fight will only get more of us killed." The captain's mandibles clicked angrily. Surrender? To a human? Do you have any idea what that would mean for our reputations? Our careers? Better than being dead, Thok muttered. Before Zexai could respond, Marcus's voice crackled through their communication system again. But this time, he wasn't alone. "Attention, Captain Zexai and crew of the Vorthak hunting vessel Blood Prize. This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commanding officer of the Human Liberation Front." The aliens looked at each other in confusion. They had never heard of any Human Liberation Front, and the title of Admiral suggested a military organization of significant size. "I am currently in orbit aboard the stealth frigate Retribution, monitoring the surface engagement through Agent Chin's tactical feed. You're ordered to surrender immediately and prepare for boarding." Marcus's voice joined the transmission. "Hello again, Admiral. I'm afraid the situation on the surface has become somewhat complicated. So I see from your reports. Excellent work, Agent Chun. Your infiltration and intelligence gathering have exceeded all expectations. Agent Chun. The words hit the surviving hunters like a physical blow. Their human prey wasn't a maintenance worker at all. He was some kind of military operative, and he had been hunting them long before they ever thought to hunt him. Captain Zexhai found his voice. This is impossible. There is no human liberation front. Humans don't have military organizations capable of mounting operations in the Outer Rim. Admiral Mitchell's response was coldly professional. Captain, your species has spent decades treating humans as disposable labor and entertainment. Did you really think we wouldn't eventually organize a response? The Federation would never allow it, Zexhai protested. Human military buildup would violate a dozen treaties. The Federation doesn't know we exist, Marcus interjected. We've been very careful to maintain our cover while we build our capabilities. Recruitment from the colonies, training facilities and dead systems, equipment acquisition through black market channels. It took us 20 years, but we finally have the resources to start fighting back. The implications were staggering. If humans had been secretly building a military organization for 2 decades, then everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities was wrong. How many ships do you have? Thok demanded. Enough, Admiral Mitchell replied. Agent Chun, what is your assessment of the remaining hostiles? Marcus's voice carried the clinical detachment of a professional soldier filing a report. 6 enemy combatants remain. 2 wounded, effectiveness reduced by approximately 70%. For combat capable, but showing signs of severe psychological stress. Morale has collapsed completely. Recommend immediate surrender demand followed by tactical assault if they refuse compliance. Understood. Captain Zexhai, you have 60 seconds to order your crew to lay down their weapons and prepare for a rest. This is your only opportunity for peaceful resolution. The captain looked around at his remaining hunters, seeing the fear and desperation in their faces. They had gone from apex predators to cornered animals in the space of a few hours, and the revelation that they were facing an organized human military force rather than a single rogue operative had shattered what remained of their confidence. What happens if we surrender? He asked. You will be transported to a Federation justice facility and charged with crimes against sentient beings, Admiral Mitchell replied. You will receive a fair trial and, if convicted, face imprisonment rather than execution. And if we don't surrender? Marcus answered that question. Then, I continue hunting you until there's nobody left to surrender. The 60 seconds stretched into eternity. Zexhai weighed his options, none of which were appealing. Surrender meant disgrace, court-martial, and the end of his career. But continuing to fight meant almost certain death at the hands of a human operative who had already demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything his species understood. Time, Admiral Mitchell announced. We surrender, Zexhai said quietly. All units, lay down your weapons. This engagement is over. The relief in his crew's voices was audible as they acknowledged the order. Plasma rifles were set aside, sidearms were powered down, and hands were raised in the universal gesture of submission. Marcus emerged from the shadows like a specter materializing from the darkness. In the red light of the dying star, he looked nothing like the submissive maintenance worker who had boarded their ship. His coveralls had been replaced by form-fitting tactical gear that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The tools he carried were clearly weapons, and his movements had the fluid grace of someone trained in a dozen different forms of combat. But it was his eyes that truly revealed the transformation. Where once there had been the deferential gaze of prey, now there was the cold, calculating stare of an apex predator evaluating its victims. Agent Marcus Chun, Human Liberation Front Special Operations Division. He introduced himself formally. You are all under arrest for crimes against humanity. Fox stared at the human in disbelief. You're not a maintenance worker. Actually, I am, Marcus replied. That wasn't a cover identity. I really do know how to repair starship systems, calibrate atmospheric recyclers, and debug navigation computers. Those are useful skills when you're infiltrating alien vessels. Then everything else was also true. I'm a maintenance worker. I'm also a trained assassin, sabotage specialist, and deep cover operative with 20 years of experience hunting criminals in the Outer Rim. Humans are remarkably good at being multiple things simultaneously. The concept seemed to confuse the aliens, who were accustomed to rigid caste systems where individuals had single, clearly defined roles. "How long have you been watching us?" Veltar asked weakly from her position on the ground. 3 months, Marcus replied. "I've been tracking your hunting expeditions, documenting your methods, and gathering evidence of your crimes." The maintenance worker persona allowed me to get close enough to confirm what I suspected, which was that you're not warriors at all. You're sadists who enjoy killing defenseless victims. Real warriors fight enemies who can fight back. Captain Zexai struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. "But your species, humans, are weak. Prey animals. Everyone knows this." Marcus smiled, and the expression was utterly without warmth. "Let me explain something about human evolution, Captain. We didn't develop as prey animals. We developed as persistent hunters on a planet filled with creatures bigger, faster, and stronger than we were." He gestured toward the hunting ground around them, littered with the evidence of his systematic dismantling of their forces. Our ancestors hunted mammoth and saber-toothed tigers with stone spears and wooden clubs. We chased our prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion, then killed it with tools we made from rocks and sticks. We survived ice ages, volcanic winters, and mass extinctions that wiped out species with better natural weapons than we had. The aliens listened in growing horror as Marcus continued his explanation. "We colonized every habitable continent on our planet by learning to adapt to environments that should have killed us. We survived in Arctic wastelands, tropical jungles, high-altitude mountains, and burning deserts. We learned to eat foods that were poisonous to other species, domesticate animals that could kill us, and cooperate in groups large enough to bring down any predator. But in space," Thok protested weakly. "In space, we maintained those same characteristics," Marcus replied. "We're the species that colonized worlds with toxic atmospheres, survived in generation ships for centuries, and adapted to gravity levels that would cripple most aliens. We did all of this while being systematically underestimated by every other species in the galaxy." The truth was beginning to dawn on the capture hunters. They hadn't been hunting prey animals at all. They had been poking at sleeping apex predators and mistaking their restraint for weakness. "Why didn't you fight back before?" Zexai asked. "If humans are capable of this, why allow yourselves to be treated as inferior?" Marcus's expression grew distant, as if he was remembering something painful. "Because my sister was right about one thing. Peaceful coexistence is preferable to warfare. Humans try to find their place in galactic society through cooperation and mutual respect. We wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves." "What changed?" "You did," Marcus said simply. "Every human you killed, every family you destroyed, every innocent person you hunted for sport pushed us a little closer to abandoning the hope of peaceful coexistence. Some of us finally decided that if the galaxy wanted to see humans as predators, then that's exactly what we would become." Overhead, the sound of approaching spacecraft broke the tension. 3 sleek vessels descended from the night sky, their hulls bearing markings that no alien government would recognize, but that struck fear into the hearts of anyone who preyed on human civilians. The Human Liberation Front had arrived to collect their prisoners. As the aliens were loaded aboard the transport ship, Captain Zexai made one last attempt to understand what had happened to his carefully planned hunt. "Agent Chun," he called out, "answer one question for me." Marcus paused at the transport's boarding ramp. "What? How many more like you are there? How many humans are part of your organization?" Marcus looked back at the captured alien with something that might have been pity. "Captain, we're the species that went from stone tools to starships in 10,000 years. were the ones who colonized 100 worlds while being systematically oppressed by every major government in the galaxy. Did you really think we would stay helpless forever? He disappeared into the transport without answering the question directly, but his meaning was clear. The age of humans as easy prey was over. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when apex predators stopped pretending to be harmless. 6 months after the incident on Zirion Prime, the trial of Captain HFY and his hunting party had become the most watched legal proceeding in Federation history. The courtroom on Nexus Station was packed with representatives from every major species, journalists from across known space, and security personnel who struggled to maintain order as shocking revelation after shocking revelation emerged from the testimony. Judge Velcurin, a distinguished Centaurian legal scholar, presided over the proceedings with growing amazement as the scope of the human liberation movement was revealed through witness testimony and documentary evidence. What had begun as a simple case of illegal hunting had evolved into something that threatened to reshape galactic politics. The court calls Agent Marcus Chun to the witness stand, announced the prosecuting attorney, a human woman whose very presence in a Federation courtroom would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Marcus approached the witness stand with the same quiet confidence he had displayed on Zirion Prime. He wore the dress uniform of the Human Liberation Front, an organization that had seemingly materialized from nowhere to challenge the galaxy's assumptions about human capabilities. Agent Chun, the prosecutor began, please state your full name and rank for the record. Marcus Chun, Commander, Human Liberation Front Special Operations Division. The title sent a murmur through the courtroom. In the months since his capture of HFY's hunting party, Marcus had been promoted within an organization that was rapidly gaining recognition as a legitimate military force. Commander Chun, how long has the Human Liberation Front existed? The organization was formally established 22 years ago, Marcus replied. However, the movement began much earlier, shortly after first contact between humanity and the galactic community. Can you describe the circumstances that led to the HLF's formation? Marcus looked directly at the gallery, where dozens of alien diplomats sat watching the proceedings. When humanity joined the galactic community, we were immediately classified as a class, 5 species, minimal technological capability, limited intelligence, suitable only for manual labor, and expendable occupations. This classification was based on our physical appearance and the assumption that any species capable of interstellar travel must have received that technology from more advanced aliens. Was this assumption correct? No. Humanity developed its own starflight technology independently. Our early ships were crude compared to galactic standards, but they worked. More importantly, they demonstrated our capacity for technological innovation. However, by the time we tried to correct the misconception, the classification had become entrenched in galactic law. The prosecutor gestured toward a holographic display that showed population statistics. What was the result of this classification? Systematic oppression. Marcus replied without emotion. Humans were denied citizenship rights, excluded from higher education, barred from owning property on most worlds, and relegated to dangerous occupations that other species considered beneath them. We became the galaxy's disposable workforce, and some aliens went further than simple economic exploitation. Yes, sport hunting of humans became popular among certain segments of alien society. Creatures like Captain HFY began treating human lives as entertainment, hunting us for pleasure while claiming they were doing the galaxy a service by culling an inferior species. In the defendant's section, HFY and his surviving crew members sat in shackles, their earlier arrogance replaced by the hollow expressions of broken predators. The revelation that their human prey belonged to a species capable of systematic retaliation had shattered their worldview completely. How did the Human Liberation Front respond to these atrocities? Marcus leaned forward slightly. We began by documenting the crimes, building evidence, tracking perpetrators, identifying patterns of abuse. Then, we started recruitment. Recruitment from where? Everywhere humans were found. colony workers, ship maintenance crews, domestic servants, cargo handlers, miners, farmers, any human willing to fight back against oppression. We offered them training, purpose, and the chance to ensure that future generations wouldn't suffer the same treatment. The prosecutor activated another holographic display, this one showing a star chart with hundreds of marked locations. Can you describe the scope of HLF operations? We currently maintain training facilities on 47 worlds, recruitment centers in every major population center where humans are present, and active cells on more than 200 space stations and ships, Marcus replied. Our membership has grown from 12 founding members to over 200,000 active operatives. The numbers sent a shock through the courtroom. 200,000 trained human operatives scattered throughout galactic civilization represented a force that no one had imagined existed. What kind of training do HLF operatives receive? Comprehensive military education, combat techniques, infiltration methods, sabotage operations, intelligence gathering, weapons training, and psychological warfare. We also provide education in galactic law, xenobiology, and cultural studies. Our operatives are trained to be invisible until they choose not to be. Judge Velkurin interrupted the testimony. Commander Chun, are you telling this court that there may be armed human operatives aboard ships and stations throughout Federation space? Yes, Your Honor. We estimate that roughly 30% of the human civilians currently employed in the galaxy have received at least basic HLF training. The implications were staggering. Millions of humans who had been dismissed as harmless laborers were actually trained operatives of a shadow military organization. Have there been other operations like the one on Zirian Prime? The prosecutor asked. Many, Marcus confirmed. The HLF has conducted over 300 missions in the past 5 years, ranging from intelligence gathering to direct action against criminals who prey on human civilians. Direct action, assassination, sabotage, and capture operations. We prioritize capture when possible, but some targets are too dangerous to take alive. The casual mention of assassination sent another murmur through the courtroom. The galaxy was learning that the species they had dismissed as weaklings had been conducting a secret war right under their noses. Commander Chun, the defense attorney interrupted, rising from his seat. Isn't it true that your organization is nothing more than a terrorist group? That you've been murdering innocent aliens based on species prejudice? Marcus turned to face the defender with an expression of mild curiosity. Define innocent, counselor. Beings who have committed no crimes against your species. Then, no, we don't target innocent beings. The HLF maintains detailed intelligence files on every operation. We target only confirmed criminals who have harmed human civilians and who cannot be reached through legal channels. But surely some mistakes have been made. Marcus shook his head. We spend months or years investigating each target before taking action. Our intelligence network is extensive, and our verification procedures are thorough. In 300 operations, we have not had a single case of mistaken identity. How can you be certain? Because we're very good at what we do, counselor. It's amazing what you can accomplish when your enemies consistently underestimate your capabilities. The defense attorney tried a different approach. Isn't it true that your organization seeks to overthrow the galactic government and establish human supremacy? Marcus actually laughed at that suggestion. Counselor, if we wanted to overthrow the galactic government, do you really think we would have brought Captain Zexhai here for trial? We could have simply eliminated him and continued operating in secret. Then what do you want? Recognition. Marcus replied simply. We want humanity to be reclassified as a full member species of the galactic community with all the rights and protections that status provides. We want an end to the systematic oppression of human civilians. And we want justice for the crimes that have been committed against our people. And if these demands are not met, Marcus's expression grew cold. Then, we continue operations until they are. The threat was delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone that it took a moment for the full implications to sink in. The Human Liberation Front wasn't asking for concessions. They were stating terms that would be enforced one way or another. Judge Velkarin called for a recess, but the damage was already done. By the time the trial resumed, emergency sessions were being called in government buildings across the galaxy as species representatives struggled to deal with a completely unexpected threat. During the recess, Captain HFY was allowed to speak with his legal counsel. The broken alien stared at his lawyer with hollow eyes. "They've been planning this for decades," he whispered. "All this time, we thought we were hunting prey animals, but they were studying us, learning our weaknesses, building an army." His lawyer, a pragmatic Corvani who specialized in military law, nodded grimly. "The prosecution has made their case. Your hunting expeditions were documented in detail. The evidence of human capabilities is overwhelming. I recommend accepting whatever plea arrangement they offer. What do you think will happen to us? Prison, certainly, but you'll be alive, which is more than you can say for some of your colleagues." HFY looked confused. "What do you mean? Haven't you been watching the news? 3 more hunting operations have been intercepted in the past month. The crews didn't surrender like you did. They chose to fight, and none of them survived. The HLF doesn't seem inclined to offer second chances to beings who continue hunting humans after learning about their capabilities." When the trial resumed, the prosecution presented their final evidence: a complete database of human disappearances over the past 50 years, cross-referenced with known hunting expeditions and criminal organizations. The scope of the atrocities was breathtaking, involving thousands of victims and hundreds of perpetrators. More importantly, the database demonstrated that the Human Liberation Front possessed intelligence capabilities that rivaled those of major governments. They had been tracking crimes, building files, and preparing for systematic retaliation while maintaining perfect operational security. "Your Honor," the prosecutor addressed the judge, "the evidence clearly shows that the defendants engaged in the systematic murder of human civilians for entertainment purposes. We request the maximum sentence allowed under Federation law." The defense attorney made a final, desperate argument. "Your Honor, my clients were acting according to the laws and customs of their home system. Human hunting was not explicitly prohibited in Vorthack space." Judge Velkarin's response was swift and definitive. "Counselor, the murder of sentient beings for sport is prohibited under universal law, regardless of local customs. The court finds the defendants guilty on all charges. The sentences were severe but fair: life imprisonment for HFY and his officers, shorter terms for the crew members who had participated but not planned the hunts. More importantly, the trial established legal precedent that would protect human civilians throughout the galaxy. But the real impact of the trial wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the emergency sessions being held by every major government as they struggled to deal with the revelation that humanity was no longer helpless. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commanding officer of the Human Liberation Front Fleet, watched the trial coverage from the bridge of her flagship. Around her, displays showed the positions of HLF assets throughout known space: ships, stations, weapons depots, and safe houses that had been built in secret over 2 decades. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different hunting organizations. They want to negotiate terms." Mitchell smiled grimly. "Accept the surrenders, but make it clear that negotiations will be conducted on our terms. The age of hunting humans for sport is over." "Yes, ma'am." "Also, we're receiving diplomatic inquiries from the Federation Council. They want to open formal relations with the HLF. Tell them we'll consider it once humanity receives full species recognition and protection under galactic law. Until then, we continue operations." The communications officer hesitated. "Admiral, some of the council members are suggesting that the HLF represents a threat to galactic security. They're discussing military action." Mitchell's smile widened. "Counselor, please remind any government considering military action against human civilians that we've spent 20 years preparing for exactly that scenario. We know where their children go to school, where their leaders live, and which systems their economies depend on. Any species that chooses to make war on humanity we'll discover that we're very good at making war back. The message was clear. The galaxy had created the Human Liberation Front through decades of oppression and casual cruelty. Now, they would have to deal with the consequences of underestimating a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to turn disadvantages into strengths. In his prison cell, Captain Zexai stared at the wall and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. He had thought he was hunting weak prey animals, but he had actually been poking at apex predators who had been carefully planning their revenge for decades. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. The species that had been dismissed as weaklings had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. Survivors who never forgot a wrong and never stopped adapting to overcome their enemies. The hunt was over, and humanity had won.